It's August 27th here at Stochastic Agency. My name is Brian. We continue our march through RPG A Day 2022. We're beginning to wrap up talking about our characters, and here we are going to discuss how has the character changed. Now, even though it just started playing this character for one session, relatively about 3-ish hours, maybe a little bit longer than that, on Saturday of last weekend, this previous weekend, I do have a good idea of how Sylvester Deusdedit has changed. We can picture the character as someone throughout the vast majority of his life growing up in the village of Dredgewater as being, that atypical son of a peasant who became, involved in his family's trade of training hunting hounds and learning the lay of the land and, hunting, and then slowly being brought into the family's connection with Lord Washburn, breeding hounds for Lord Washburn, training them for hunting and various activities, to then, as he comes into his teenage years, learning to, use a bow much better as a professional soldier, then plying his trade as a scout in the region because of the conflict on the border to our south, if I remember correctly, with Lord Mort. And, just growing up in what is an atypical fiefdom peasant life of someone in the Dark Ages, scraping things together, avoiding disease, avoiding hunger and famine, and all that stuff that goes along with that time period. How he changed is when we get to when the session starts and he begins to see the paranoia of Lord Washburn and the most recent natural disaster, the social unrest, both political and religious, and it's just opened his eyes between, what is necessary for the good, to question the powers that be, not just the powers of man, but, religious beliefs, fundamental religious beliefs. So he has changed from his pagan influenced upbringing into someone that is a skeptic because of this whole Christianity influence. He's not a strong believer in either. And so that he finds himself in the middle ground, which is a very tough place to be. You never want to always be in the middle of the road, right? If you're in the middle of the road, it's a good chance you might get run over. So I see Sylvester as having changed from someone who had fairly strong beliefs and some certainties about how the world worked growing up, to when these current events took place that has caused him to shift in his belief more in man's ability to take care of himself, and that man must take charge of the world around him if he wants to be the change maker, and to be a change maker for the benefit of all involved, for the community, instead of everything just goes uphill, to the lordship and monarchy, because he's been slightly disillusioned at this point between the extreme swing as we went into winter and these natural events and the social unrest began to happen, and the behavior that Lord Washburn has been exhibiting lately. So he himself has started to question leadership, both religious and politically. He is looking for a way for the community to rely on itself than to have to rely on just one person and one group of people to provide all the protection and things that are necessary for a community to flourish. He's changed in his idea of what loyalty means to the community and to those in charge. And that whereas before he probably wasn't a big social risk taker, now he has become a big social risk taker. And the fact that, many of his actions, as I've mentioned over the course of this last week, would be perceived as treasonous to Lord Washburn, but to the peasantry, they would be perceived as, possibly heroic. This is an individual who has, gone beyond and above what is his station to provide safety and sustenance for the community. Although Sai doesn't think of it as, I'm doing this to gain favor. He believes that, whereas his family's responsibility in the past has always been to, or more or less aligned with, Lord Washburn, he's now taken kind of this broader view of what his responsibility is as, a member of the militia and the forces of Lord Washburn over and with the community of Dredgewater. So it's a big swing for sure, and it's a lot to really try and develop within such a short time span of a gaming session, just coming out of the gate. But sometimes it's that easy when you're presented with opportunities to see or explore how a character could change, which would make you ask the question, what was the character's view before this, and what about is happening now has caused them to go from that previously to be presented with this opportunity as, an inhabitant of this setting. And what is it going to make them change into? How does that change them physically? Guaranteed that my character could die pretty easily, be put to death. The character is changing morally and socially. He's changing religiously in his spiritual beliefs. So there's going to be this huge confluence probably between the narrative session that we're going to be doing, where we got to kind of cover what happens over the course of the 3 days as we advance things narratively for 3 days. And then when we hit the episode 2 of the Chronicle for Dark Age of Man. It's interesting, always fun to kind of examine a character so closely on these kind of levels, instead of thinking about what is my next progression, how does the character change mechanically and things like that. One of the things that did come out of the session previously, I gained experience in the form of what's called repute. So talking about how the character has changed, we talk about how the character concept has changed. Let's talk about how the character mechanically has changed. So these 2 points I distributed over 2 attributes, so 1 point each. Whereas before, Sai had no luck score in the game, I have now allocated a point into luck, and I started out the character with a prestige, kind of your character's perceived or actual social standing in the game. Started out with a rank of 2, and I have added 1 onto that. We'll see how that works out. That prestige is, I hope, not going to be a bad choice, because it could go in a couple of different ways. By adding this point to prestige, how high has Sylvester been elevated in the eyes of the peasantry? What does this rise in prestige, as things potentially may be discovered, mean to Lord Washburn? What is this prestige and how can these perceptions affect, Cy doesn't have a spouse or a significant other of his own, but how could that possibly affect his family, positive or negative? Very easy to kind of just, dole those out, because I know that Sylvester's going to need a lot of luck, and so might the Deus-Dedit family to come out through this whole thing of what Cy has done and the decisions he made, and come out on the other end with hopefully the family intact, not lose any body parts or get drawn and quartered or executed in some way, hung, head chopped off. Who knows what could possibly happen? But overall, that's how the character has changed. So we're going to start breaking into the weekend, and next week we're going to talk about RPG A Day itself, if I remember correctly on the list. So, hey everybody, thanks for sticking with it through RPG A Day. This was such a great way for me to kind of get back in the habit of making videos, relearn a lot of things I've forgotten, try and catch up on all those skill sets that everybody talks about on YouTube about making videos, and just try and get to a better spot. Thank you for hanging in there this far, and be good to each other out there while you're playing games, introducing people to RPGs, and just try and have a great one.